Hey, beautiful, please consider subscribing to our channel if you've been enjoying these stories. Your support helps a lot. Aid us in reaching our goal of 1,000 subscribers.
It was the kind of morning that felt like a deep exhale after a long breath. The sun filtered through the kitchen blinds, casting warm golden stripes across the countertop. The smell of brewing coffee lingered like a memory in the air, as Mark leaned back in his wooden chair, listening to the soft creak of the house settling. His hands wrapped around the chipped mug he always used, one with a fading American flag print. It had been his wife's favorite. She'd passed 3 years ago. Since then, quiet mornings like this were all he had left that felt like her. He took a slow sip, his mind drifting, until a metallic clink at the front door snapped his focus back. The sound was sharp like keys rattling, but not in a way that made sense. Another click followed, then a jarring rattle as if someone was trying to force a key into the lock. Mark froze. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a neighbor. It was deliberate. He set the mug down slowly and moved toward the hallway. Each step was cautious, his bare feet silent against the hardwood. He reached for the old baseball bat he kept leaned behind the umbrella stand just in case. Not because he expected trouble, just because trouble had a way of showing up when you least expected it. Another sharp jingle of metal. Then a frustrated grunt. He opened the front door without warning. Standing on his porch was a woman in her 50s with bleached, blonde hair teased high and held in place with enough hairspray to survive a hurricane. She wore a pink tracksuit that looked more like a costume than clothing. Oversized sunglasses covered most of her face, and in her hand was a jangling key ring with a long gold key. Already halfway in the lock, she looked up, startled, but recovered fast. Her lips twisted into a confident smirk. "Oh," she said, "you must be the squatter." Mark blinked. "Excuse me." She held up the keyring as if it explained everything. "I'm the HOA president. This is a master key. It opens all the homes." Under HOA jurisdiction, Mark lowered the bat but didn't let it go. "This house isn't vacant. I live here." She scoffed like someone being told the sky was green. "No, you don't. This property was listed as unoccupied. We keep tabs on these things. You're not on the resident registry." Mark stepped forward just enough to make her take a half step back. "I bought this house 6 months ago. My name's on the deed." She gave him a quick up and down like she was assessing a bargain bin item that someone had dared to gift her. Well, someone made a mistake. "I manage this neighborhood. You can't just show up and claim a house like it's a stray dog." "I didn't show up. I moved in. Legally. Would you like to see the documents?" She waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Don't bother. I know what I know. And what I know is this key should open your door." But it didn't. "So either you change the locks without authorization or you're trespassing." Mark's patience, which had once endured late-night raids in Afghanistan and the DMV at lunch hour, began to fray. "I don't need authorization to change locks on my own house. I'm not part of your little HOA circus." That got her attention. Her mouth parted slightly. Then she laughed. "Oh, honey, everyone in this neighborhood is part of the HOA. It's not optional, it's mandatory. Covenant, signed, sealed. Delivered." Mark folded his arms across his chest, his voice calm. "Cold, not this house. I checked before I bought it. This lot was grandfathered in, never signed the original covenant. Not legally required to join. Never agreed to your rules. So I'll ask you again. Why are you trying to unlock my door?" She blinked. Then her smile returned, thinner, this time more forced. "I think I'll call the police. Let them sort this out. Please do." There was no sarcasm in his tone. Just steel. Karen stepped back, pulled her phone from her glitter-covered purse, and dialed with the flair of someone used to being obeyed. Mark turned and walked back inside, leaving the door open. He sat at the kitchen table watching the steam rise from his coffee. A minute later, he picked up his own phone and made a call. "Hey son, got a situation at the house? You mind coming by?" The voice on the other end was warm and steady. "Be there in 10. Outside, Karen paced dramatically, narrating her 911 call loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Yes, I'm at 104 Magnolia Court. There's a man here claiming to live in one of our homes. I'm the HOA president. I have the master key. He refused entry. I think he's squatting." She threw in a sniff like she was about to cry. "I feel unsafe. Please send someone quickly." By now, 2 neighbors had stepped onto their porches. Drawn by the commotion, Karen waved to them. "Just handling a trespasser. Nothing to worry about. Always on duty." One of the neighbors, a retired schoolteacher named Linda, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Karen turned back to the door. "Mark, was it? This will go easier for you if you just leave now." Mark didn't answer. 5 minutes later, the distinct sound of tires on gravel echoed down the street. A sheriff's cruiser rolled up smooth and quiet. Karen lit up like a Christmas tree. Finally, she strutted toward the vehicle, the phone still pressed dramatically to her ear. Then the door opened, and Sheriff Derek Jennings stepped out. Karen's stride slowed. Derek was tall, lean, with the kind of calm authority that made people lower their voices. He adjusted his belt, nodded at a few watching neighbors, and then walked straight to the porch. "Dad, everything." "All right." Karen's jaw dropped. Dad Derek didn't look at her yet. His focus remained on Mark, who stood just inside the doorway. "Yeah, I'm fine." She was just trying to let herself in with a master key. Derek turned slowly. "I'm sorry, who are you again?" Karen regained composure fast. "I'm Karen, president of this HOA. I thought this property was empty. When my key didn't work, I feared it was a squatter situation. I was just doing my duty." "You called 911, she nodded. "For the safety of the neighborhood, of course." Derek's face stayed unreadable. "Did you verify with county property?" "Records before entering? I didn't have to. We maintain our own registry. It's never wrong." Mark stepped forward. "Tell him about the master key." Karen hesitated. "It's a standard key. For emergencies, the HOA is allowed to have access." Derek looked at her now. Really looked. Access to homes without owner permission violates privacy law in this county, especially when the owner isn't part of your HOA, which this property isn't. Karen paled. "Just a shade. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Sure sounds like it." The tension thickened. Neighbors watched silently. Some recorded. Derek's voice remained calm. "You forced a key into someone's door without legal grounds. You made a false emergency report. You misrepresented authority. That's 3 counts before lunch." Karen's lips moved, but no sound came out. Mark stepped past them both. "I'd suggest you go now. And don't come back unless it's with an apology or a lawyer." Karen didn't move. Derek took a step forward. "Now?" She turned, stumbling slightly as she walked back to her car. No dramatic flair this time. Just a woman who had finally run out of script. Mark sipped his coffee, watching her go. The porch was quiet again, but the story was just beginning. Mark sat on the porch that evening watching the sky fade from burnt orange to deep velvet. The air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle and mown grass. Crickets had started their nightly symphony, and somewhere down the road a dog barked once, then went quiet. He held the same chipped coffee mug, now filled with iced tea condensation sliding down the side like sweat. The confrontation with Karen replayed in his mind, not because he was shaken, but because it reminded him of something he thought he'd left behind. That particular breed of entitlement. The kind that walked through life assuming ownership of everything it touched. The kind that never expected to be told no. He had dealt with commanders like that. Politicians too. They always had the same smile, the same hungry gleam in their eyes when they saw something they thought they could take. The sliding door creaked open behind him, and Derek stepped out carrying a paper bag in one hand and a bottle of hot sauce in the other. "You haven't eaten a real meal today, have you?" Mark shrugged without looking. "Coffee counts." Derek set the bag down and unwrapped 2 greasy burgers with practiced care. "Not according to Mom, it doesn't." They ate in silence for a while, watching fireflies drift lazily over the grass. "You think she'll come back, Mark?" finally asked Derek. Didn't answer right away. "She's not used to being told no. People like that don't back down. They escalate." Mark nodded slowly. "Then we escalate better." Derek gave a quiet laugh. "You've still got that army brain. But remember, we have to do this the right way. No traps, no stunts. Just facts. Law." Patience. Mark didn't respond. He didn't have to. They both knew patience wasn't his strong suit. But this wasn't war. Not the kind with bullets. The next morning, Mark walked to the mailbox and found a glossy envelope with the HOA seal embossed in gold. It smelled faintly of perfume and smugness. Inside was a formal letter addressed to occupant, not even his. Namit read like a legal threat wrapped in flowery language. Violations. Failure to comply. Notification of lien process. It was laughable. He took the letter and went straight to the county clerk's office. The woman behind the desk was named Patty, and she wore reading glasses low on her nose like they were judging the documents she scanned. "Morning, Mr. Jennings. What can I do for you? Need a certified copy of my property deed?" Fast, she pulled it up in moments and printed it on thick paper with a blue seal at the bottom. Mark tucked it into a folder along with the HOA letter. Next stop, the law library downtown, where he spent 2 hours confirming everything he already knew. His property was legally exempt from the HOA covenant. The original charter, filed 20 years ago, had excluded 6 lots. His was one of them. No one had ever amended it. No vote, no consent, no loophole. When he got home, he printed copies of the law. He highlighted the key phrases. He was ready. 3 days passed quietly. Karen didn't show. But the HOA did. 2 men with clipboards and matching polo shirts stood in his front yard, taking pictures of his flower beds, his mailbox, even his porch furniture. One of them had a measuring tape. Mark walked outside, calm as ever. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" They turned together like synchronized swimmers. One offered a tight smile. "Routine inspection. We're from the HOA Compliance Board. You're standing on private property. This isn't a compliance area. You can leave now." They exchanged a look, then stepped back without argument. But they took one last picture before driving off. The next morning, a note appeared on his garage door. Handwritten, tape curling at the edges. "Remove unapproved decorations within 48 hours or fines will be assessed." There were no decorations. Just a flagpole with the American flag and his wife's wind chime. Nothing else. He took a photo of the note, then removed it and filed it in the same folder now labeled evidence. Derek dropped by that afternoon with updates. They're trying to create a paper trail. Build a case that you're in violation, so they can justify fines. It won't hold, but they're hoping you'll either pay or crack. "I won't, I know. Just remember, we're building a case too." Let them bury themselves. But Mark wasn't just waiting. He started talking to neighbors. Quiet conversations over fences, sharing what happened. Not everyone liked Karen. Some outright hated her. She had fined kids for sidewalk chalk, threatened to tow an old man's RV from his own driveway. She once made a single mother remove a bird feeder because it attracted the wrong kind of birds. Each story was worse than the last. One neighbor, a woman named Teresa, who worked from home, had captured video of the 2 clipboard men poking around her flower beds uninvited. Another had copies of letters almost identical to the one Mark received, threatening legal action for imaginary violations. Mark gathered it all. Photos, video, signed statements, a dossier of overreach. Then he waited. Karen returned on Sunday morning, dressed like she was attending a royal christening. White sun hat, oversized pearls, clipboard in hand. Mark opened the door before she knocked. "Good morning, trespasser," he said evenly. Her smile didn't falter. "Good morning, obstructionist. I'm here to perform a scheduled HOA audit. You've been found in repeated violation, and failure to acknowledge our authority only compounds the offense. I'm not part of your HOA. We've decided that your property is included retroactively. You reside within community boundaries and benefit from community services." Mark stepped onto the porch, his voice firm. "Like what?" "The pothole you haven't fixed in 3 years. It's a broken streetlight you ignored. Or the monthly newsletter that complains about kids' bikes on sidewalks." Karen blinked, then regained her composure. "You leave me no choice. I'll begin lien proceedings effective immediately." Mark handed her a folder. "This is a certified copy of my deed. This is the county covenant showing exemption. This is a list of legal violations committed by your board. And this is a notarized letter informing you that any further attempts to enter my property or enforce false claims will result in civil action." She didn't take it, just stared. "And here's one more thing. You know my son, the sheriff, a tease, filed a report. You're already being investigated for misuse of emergency services. That's a misdemeanor." Karen's hand twitched. Her mouth opened, then closed like a puppet waiting for a line. Mark smiled. "I suggest you leave now, and maybe read up on actual law before you come knocking again." She turned slowly, walked down the steps without speaking, and drove off without looking back. Mark watched her disappear down the road. He could feel it wasn't over. It was just the pause before the storm. The rain came down in sheets that night, heavy and rhythmic, pounding the roof like a warning drum. The kind of storm that made the windows rattle and the power flicker. The kind of storm where things happened in the dark that never would in the daylight. Mark sat by the window, sipping from his usual mug, though now it held nothing but cold tea and a few melting cubes. The storm suited his mood. It matched the tension that had been steadily climbing ever since Karen's last visit, and her silence since then felt too much like a setup. He hadn't seen her for 3 days, not a whisper, not a complaint, not even a passive-aggressive note, which worried him more than if she had showed up with a bullhorn and a marching band. Derek had warned him about quiet villains. They planned more. They dug deeper. They waited until the blow landed the hardest, and Karen didn't strike. Mark, as someone who accepted defeat with grace, so he watched the street, waiting for headlights that didn't come and listening for a knock that never landed until the sound came from the back door. Instead was soft, deliberate, and wrong. Mark stood quietly, set the mug down, and moved to the hallway barefoot so his steps didn't echo. He didn't switch on the lights he didn't need to. The lightning flashes outside lit the house in brief bursts of blue-white clarity. Another knock, this time louder, followed by the unmistakable jingle of metal against metal. A Keymark's pulse spiked as he reached for the small safe tucked behind the bookshelf. He opened it and pulled out the old revolver, not loaded, just heavy and present, a relic from a past life. It was meant to speak, not fire. He walked to the door and waited, breathing steady as a third rattle told him someone was trying the lock again. The bolt held, but the doorknob twisted slowly, then stopped. Mark threw the door open. Rain blasted in, soaking the floor, and standing in the glow of a motion sensor floodlight was Karen, drenched from hat to heels, makeup streaked, eyeliner running like she'd cried through a car wash. She held a shiny brass key in her hand and looked up, as if startled to find him there. "You're trespassing," Mark said calmly. "This is a lawful entry. I have master access to all community properties," she snapped, shoving the key toward him like it was a badge. "Wrong again. This isn't a community property. This is my private home, and what you just did is attempted unlawful entry with intent to deceive. That's a felony, Karen. I have the right to inspect this house for code compliance and emergency Safety checks, there's no emergency except the one you just made. Mark said, his voice like steel beneath velvet. Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment she didn't speak. Then she pointed past him into the house. "Where's your wife? I want to speak with the other owner." Mark didn't blink. "She's dead, has been for 5 years now, but thank you for the reminder that made her stumble." She hadn't known. She hadn't checked. She looked like she regretted asking, but her pride refused to break. "You people think you're above the law just because your son wears a badge. Well, I'll tell you something. Even the sheriff answers to the rules." Mark stepped closer, just enough to make her backpedal into the rain again. "My son enforces actual laws, not imaginary ones, and right now you're breaking 3 of them behind him." Headlights cut through the darkness, and tires rolled over wet gravel. Derek's cruiser slid into view, light bar off, engine humming low and steady. Karen turned at the sound as Derek stepped out in uniform, his hat tucked under one arm, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, I need you to put the key down and step away from the door." She scoffed and held the key higher, like it proved something. "I'm the HOA president. I have legal authority over this residence. He's non-compliant. He has refused inspections and violated multiple clauses." Derek walked forward slowly, rain soaking his shoulders. "This residence is exempt from the HOA covenant, and even it wasn't you, don't have the right to force entry with a key that doesn't belong to you. I do have the right. This is part of my jurisdiction." Derek didn't flinch. "You called 911 5 minutes ago, said you were locked out of your own property. You claimed it was a safety issue, and dispatch logged it as a burglary in progress. Do you understand what that means?" Karen's lips parted, but no sound came. "It means you lied on a police report that's misuse of emergency services and false representation, which carries a fine and possible jail time." She looked at the key like it had betrayed her. "This is a mistake, a misunderstanding. I thought you thought wrong." Derek cut her off, his tone sharper now. "You thought you could scare him into giving up his home. You thought calling the police would end it in your favor. But the truth is, you walked up to a locked house in a storm, used an unauthorized key, and tried to force your way in." Karen turned to Mark, desperate now. "This is all a big mix-up. I was told his house was part of the community and that I could enter. If there was suspicion of hazard, or no one told you that," Derek interrupted. "You made that decision yourself, and now you're going to face the consequences." She tried to protest again, but the words melted under the rain and the rising panic in her eyes. She knew she had gone too far. Mark stepped back into the house, not slamming the door, but closing it slowly, leaving Derek to handle the rest. He sat down again, soaked now, but still calm. He didn't even feel the chill through the thin glass. He watched his son handcuff Karen gently as possible, while she shouted promises of lawsuits and retribution that fell flat in the wet. Night neighbors started to appear, porch lights flicking on silhouettes, standing in doorways watching. Silent witnesses to the final act. One even pulled out a phone, recording the moment Karen shrieked about being unlawfully detained, while Derek read her rights in a low, even voice. The irony was almost too perfect. The woman who had tried to control every corner of the neighborhood now being driven away in the back of a cruiser, like any other entitled fool who thought the rules didn't apply to her. As the red taillights faded down the road, Mark leaned back against the couch cushions, letting the storm mask the sound of his heartbeat. There would still be paperwork and hearings and probably a whole lot of online drama, but the important part was done. The line had been drawn, the house defended, not with fists or threats, but with truth, law, and the unshakable bond between a father and a son who stood their ground. And as thunder rolled again somewhere beyond the hills, Mark closed his eyes and smiled for the first time in days, knowing exactly how this story was going to end. The courtroom smelled faintly of dust and would polish the kind of sterile scent that clung to places built for judgment and reckoning. Mark sat in the front row, his spine straight, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Derek leaned slightly forward, elbows on his knees, his badge tucked away for the day, but his presence Unmistakable Karen sat 3 rows ahead, her pearl earrings. Noticeably absent, her usual smug poise replaced with nervous tension. She glanced back once, locked eyes with Mark, and quickly looked away. Had been 3 weeks since the arrest, and the neighborhood had changed in quiet, subtle ways. Porch lights stayed on longer. Kids played louder and more freely. Neighbors who once whispered behind blinds now waved when Mark walked by. Some even brought pies or left handwritten notes of support on his doorstep. One note simply read, "Thank you for standing up to her, we were scared." The HOA had gone eerily silent. Karen's second in command, a man named Greg, had resigned 2 days after her arrest, claiming stress and poor leadership. Many speculated he had been her enabler. Others said he had been coerced by her threats. Either way, he vanished without much fanfare. Today was the final hearing, not a criminal trial, but a civil proceeding to determine whether Karen had abused her authority and whether the HOA would remain under her leadership. A local judge presided, stern and impartial. The room was filled with murmurs until the bailiff announced order. Karen's lawyer, a sleek man in a silver tie, stood and began spinning a tale of miscommunication, poor legal advice, and misunderstood jurisdiction. He called her a passionate leader, someone dedicated to protecting the community from decline. He said her actions, though extreme, came from a place of civic responsibility. Mark listened quietly, never moving, never blinking. Then Derek took the stand, not as a son, but as the responding officer. His voice was firm, measured, devoid of emotion. He recounted the call, the forced key entry, the lies on the emergency dispatch, the arrest, the panic in her voice when she realized she had crossed a line. No one would cover for when it was Mark's turn to testify. He stood slowly, walked to the podium, and looked directly at the judge. "She came to my door with a clipboard and a smile, and tried to claim ownership over my home over and over again. She left notes, made threats, sent enforcers. She crossed property lines, and she tried to use a fake emergency to force her way inside while I was alone during a storm." He paused, letting the silence settle like dust. This wasn't leadership, it was obsession. She didn't want order, she wanted obedience. And when I refused, she tried to break the law to punish me for saying no. There was no need to raise his voice. Every word hit like gravel tossed into a glass bowl, quiet, sharp, undeniable. Judge thanked him and asked a few questions, all procedural and brief, then called for a recess outside in the hall. Karen approached Mark, flanked by her lawyer, but her eyes only on him. Her voice was quieter now, almost fragile. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought you were just trying to make a point. I didn't think you'd destroy me." Mark looked at her without hate, just honesty. "I didn't destroy you, Karen. You did that all by yourself." She opened her mouth, but no words came, so she turned and walked away, shoulders heavy, steps slow back. In the courtroom, the judge delivered a swift ruling. Karen was found to have grossly exceeded her authority. Her position was officially terminated. Her actions deemed both unethical and unlawful. The HOA was to undergo restructuring with mandatory oversight. A public apology letter from Karen was ordered to be delivered to every resident, and she was fined heavily for legal damages. When the gavel came down, the air shifted like a room. Finally, exhaling outside, neighbors gathered near the steps, waiting, curious, cautious, when the news broke. In hushed words, then louder celebrations began, laughter, handshakes, relief. People clapped Mark on the back. Some called him a hero, though he didn't feel like one. He just wanted peace. Later that evening, sitting on the porch again, Mark watched the sunset paint the clouds in streaks of gold and lavender. Derek brought out 2 glasses of iced tea and sat beside him, boots muddy from his shift eyes, still scanning the horizon like a habit he'd never shake. "You think it's over, Derek?" asked quietly. Mark nodded. Legally, yes. Spiritually, maybe not. But, "Tay, don't think she'll try again. Not after today, she won't," Derek said, with quiet certainty. "She's humiliated and broke and officially powerless now." They sat In silence for a moment, the soft clink of ice, the whisper of wind through the trees. Then Derek chuckled. She really tried to open your door with a master key, like this was some movie. Mark laughed to a real one, full and deep, the kind that started in the belly and reached the sky, yeah. And then called the cops when it didn't work, forgot my son was the sheriff. Derek smiled, shaking his head. I should get that printed on a t-shirt. HOA Karen called 911 on my house, forgot my kid runs the county. Mark leaned back, eyes closed, that would sell like hotcakes online, especially with her mugshot next to it. They both laughed again, and for the first time since the whole ordeal began, Mark felt the storm inside him had truly passed. He didn't need revenge or applause or even an apology. He had something better. His home intact, his dignity defended, his son by his side, and a community. Finally, free to breathe, the stars came out slowly, one by one, blinking into view, as if applauding the end of a very long play, and somewhere down the road, past the houses and hedges, the future waited silent and open wide as the summer night. Mark raised his glass to the stars and said, 2 fences, keys, and knowing when to stand. Your ground. Derek tapped his glass against it and said, to never backing down when it matters most. And the porch light glowed like a lighthouse, guiding them forward into whatever came next.